Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking on a truly monumental topic. We're diving into scholarship that looks at a single life, not just as a piece of history, but as a complete instruction manual for humanity.
That's a great way to put it, an instruction manual.
We're working from a really detailed source, Emsalsi's Örnek Şahsiyet, which translates to the peerless exemplary personality.
Yeah.
It's all about Hazreti Muhammad Mustafa. And our mission today is to cut through all the layers and get to the core principles.
Exactly, because for those in this tradition, he's known as the Usve Hasim, the most perfect example or the best model. And the idea isn't just to study him like a historical figure, it's to see his life as a blueprint.
A blueprint for what, exactly?
For moral and spiritual excellence, one that's meant to be applicable to anyone, anywhere, at any time.
And the sources set the scale for this blueprint right from the start. They frame his entire purpose with two divine descriptions of him. First, he's called a mercy to the worlds, which is, that's incredibly comprehensive. It suggests a compassion that goes way beyond just human boundaries.
Way beyond. And the second one?
The second is that he possesses a great moral character. And the sources, they don't treat these like simple compliments. They're framed as fundamental attributes that define his whole reason for being.
And to really get the weight of those attributes, we have to start, well, not in the 7th century. We have to go back to the very beginning of creation.
The beginning.
Yeah. The foundational belief here is that this individual was sent as a Nur in Sisi, a pearl of light. The idea was to bring eternal guidance to humanity when it was at its most fragmented, its darkest.
Okay, so that moves the conversation far beyond a typical biography.
Yeah.
What exactly is this concept of light that, predates his actual physical birth?
It's a concept called Nur-i Muhammadi, or the Muhammadan light. And it's a profound belief. It's the idea that the entire universe, the cosmos, stars, the very soil we stand on, everything, it all exists because of his light. The claim is that all of creation gets its ultimate meaning, its value, based on the love and connection shown to this light. It literally puts his existence at the genesis of everything.
So he's there before the beginning. And the sources, they actually offer a pretty stunning story to illustrate this, don't they? It links all the way back to the first human, Adam.
Yes, the story of Adam's repentance. So after being removed from paradise, Adam is seeking forgiveness. And according to the sources, he specifically uses the name Muhammad to appeal to God.
But wait, how could he possibly know that name? The prophet hadn't been created yet.
That's the question he'd asked. And Adam explains that when he was in paradise, he looked up and saw an inscription written on the very pillars of the divine throne.
What did it say?
La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. There is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger of God.
So it was already there.
It was already there. And God then confirms to Adam that, yes, Muhammad was the most beloved of creation, and that if he had not existed, Adam himself would not have been created. This isn't just historical importance, it's cosmic importance.
When you lay it out like that, it provides some really intense context for the awe that even the prophets before him held. I'm thinking of the story about Moses.
Oh, absolutely. Moses was apparently shown the merits of the prophet's community in the divine tablets, and it moved him deeply.
What stood out to him?
A few things. That this community would be the best community. That they'd be the last to arrive in history, but the first to enter paradise. And here's a beautiful detail. Their sacred book, the Quran, would be kept in their heart.
Memorized.
Memorized. Not just on scrolls that could be lost or destroyed. And Moses was so overwhelmed by this, he asked God repeatedly, make me a part of that community.
That really drives home the spiritual high watermark that the sources claim this revelation represents. Okay, so now we have to pivot from that very high theological discussion to the raw, visceral, historical impact.
Yeah.
Because he was sent into a society in absolute crisis.
Absolutely. The historical moment he appeared in is crucial. It's called the Jahiliyyah, the Age of Ignorance. And the source material it's unsparing. It describes a time of darkness, of cruelty.
Where people were just lost.
Lost is a good word. Morally, they were caught in these endless cycles of tribal warfare, vendettas, even burying their infant daughters alive. And the transformation he brought to that landscape is presented as the primary proof of his model.
And this change wasn't. It wasn't some slow institutional reform. It was immediate. It was personal. You can see this spiritual alchemy in the story of Habeshi Vashi.
Vashi is such a powerful example. He was a man defined by violence, described as having a murderous soul, a savage spirit, before he encountered the prophet's guidance.
And after.
He became a humble, devout companion, completely changed. And what's critical is how the sources explain it. It wasn't just fear or coercion, it was a complete spiritual reversal. He turned the darkest parts in himself into a source of light.
It shows the transformation was an internal renovation project, not just a set of external laws. And this impact was so powerful, it even shook the foundations of their culture. I mean, we see the immediate end of the famous poetry competitions in Mecca.
Yes, poetry was the absolute pinnacle of Arab culture. These competitions were everything. But the sources tell this story about the famous poet Imrul Kay's sister. She hears just one short verse from the Quran.
Just one verse.
One verse about the flood. And she immediately says that her brother's famous, celebrated poem, they can't possibly stand against this, and she takes it down from the Kaaba wall herself. The old standard for truth and beauty was just. It was rendered obsolete in an instant.
Beyond eloquence, though, the single strongest pillar of this transformation seems to be his character, specifically his trustworthiness. This is something even his most bitter enemies just couldn't deny.
Precisely. I mean, if you look at the political context, he faced constant, lethal opposition. But the evidence for his honesty is it's overwhelming. Take Abu Sufyan. He was leading the opposition against the Prophet at the time.
Right, his chief rival.
And he's questioned by the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius. And in a foreign court, Abu Sufyan, his enemy, confirms that the Prophet never broke a promise.
His enemy vouched for his integrity.
Yeah.
And then there's that really stinging admission from Abu Jahl.
Oh, yes. He and his companions basically told the Prophet to his face, "We don't deny you. You are truthful and honest in our eyes, but we deny what you have brought."
They separated the messenger from the message.
Exactly. They admitted their disbelief was ideological. It had nothing to do with any flaw in his personal conduct. And that right there is the foundation of the Usve Hassin, the universal model. His life was documented so meticulously to ensure his example could apply to every possible human situation.
So he lived through the entire spectrum of human experience.
The entire spectrum. So you can relate to him, whether you're, ruling an empire or just struggling to get by.
Okay, let's break that universality down, because that's where the real power of this model is. He really did embody the extremes. So what if you find yourself wealthy and powerful?
Then you look at his example after the conquest of Mecca. He had total power. He was the ruler of all Arabia. And yet, what you see is total humility, total generosity.
What if you're on the complete opposite end of that? You're poor, you're marginalized, you're just starting out.
Then you look to his youth. You remember he worked as a simple shepherd for his uncle, Abu Talib. He knew what it was like to be a worker. If you're defeated, if you're suffering a terrible loss, you look to his patience after the Battle of Uhud.
And conversely, if you're experiencing this moment of total victory, like when he finally entered Mecca after years of exile, what does the model demand then?
That moment it's maybe the most powerful display of humility in history. He didn't ride in on a war horse with banners flying. He entered Mecca prostrating on his camel, and he forgave all of his enemies.
Everyone who had persecuted him.
Everyone. It was a radical break from the tradition of conquest. And it's a virtue that even Western historians like Stanley Lane Polo point to as just extraordinary.
And this humility, it wasn't just for big moments. It was there when he was dealing with sensitive political issues, too. The sources point to his role as a judge.
Right, with the Black Stone. The tribes were about to go to war over who got the honor of placing it back in the Kaaba.
A civil war was brewing.
And he's called to mediate. He doesn't pick one leader. He puts the stone on a cloth, has the leaders of all the tribes lift it together, and then he places the stone himself. It was a perfect model for just arbitration. Everyone's honor was upheld.
And we see that same refusal to act like a king in that amazing story of the man who was trembling before him on the day Mecca was conquered.
It's such a human moment. This man he's overcome by the Prophet's presence, and the Prophet's response just cuts through all of it. He says, "Be calm, brother. I am not a king or sovereign."
He brings it right down to a human level.
He says, "I am merely the orphan son of your former neighbor from Quraysh who used to eat simple, sun-dried meat." He just dissolved the hierarchy in a single sentence, reminded everyone he was one of them.
So moving beyond leadership, we get into this realm of pure compassion. His title is Rahmatan lil Alamin, mercy to the worlds. And the scope of this is it's huge.
It is. It covers the most marginalized people, servants, dependents, and what's astonishing for the time, even animals. His final advice before his death was focused on this: be mindful of prayer and fear God regarding those under your command.
And this wasn't just an abstract principle. The sources translated into really practical daily ethics, like the rule about sharing food.
Yes, it's so simple but so powerful. If a servant brings you your food, the instruction is if you won't seat him at your own table, you absolutely must give him a bite or two.
And the reason.
Because he bore the heat and the trouble of preparing it. It's a recognition of his humanity, his labor. He also advised forgiving servants for their mistakes 70 times a day.
70 times a day. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a radically high bar for patience.
And this protective instinct was clearly directed at the most vulnerable. He gave this powerful warning against violating the rights of the two weak ones, the orphan and the woman. And caring for orphans was so important to him that he joined his two fingers together to show how close in paradise the person who does that would be to him.
The ethical model even extends to those who can't speak for themselves, to animals.
And this is where the depth of the mercy really shines. We have the story of him getting genuinely upset when he sees a starving camel, its skin stuck to its bones. He finds the owner and says, "Fear God regarding these animals that cannot speak."
He was institutionalizing animal welfare.
He was. And there's the caution around slaughter, too. He scolds a man for sharpening his knife right in front of the animal, and he asks him, "Do you wish to kill it twice?"
Kill it twice, meaning with terror before the act itself.
Exactly. That level of detail shows that compassion wasn't an abstract idea. It permeated every single action.
And ultimately, the sources make it clear that any act of mercy, no matter how small the recipient, is rewarded by the divine.
Right. The classic example is the story of the sinful woman who's forgiven by God for one simple act of kindness, giving water from her shoe to a thirsty, panting dog. The mercy shown to the dog was answered by God.
So if this is the perfect, all-encompassing model, what does the source material say is required of us today to try and emulate it? The focus seems to shift to, well, to our own internal readiness.
It does. The sources are very clear that following the prophet is the ultimate measure of your love for God. They cite that famous verse, say, "If you love Allah, follow me, and Allah will love you." And to do that, you need something called kalbi kavam.
Kalbi kavam, what is that? Spiritual readiness.
Spiritual readiness, a balanced heart. The idea is that the model is best accessed by those who hope to meet Allah in the last day and remember Allah often.
And how do you achieve that state?
Through zik, the constant remembrance of the divine. It's a spiritual practice meant to calm the heart, to remove those spiritual sicknesses like ego and jealousy, so you can actually absorb and reflect the prophet's character.
But the sources must also place some boundaries, right? There have to be actions that are unique to him, that aren't for us to imitate. Otherwise, the whole thing becomes impossible.
That is a crucial point. It's often called the measures in the stars. The sources are explicit that not everything he did is for universal imitation. Some things were reserved for his incredibly high spiritual station.
Can you give us an example?
The most famous one is Savamai Vaisal fasting for multiple consecutive days without breaking it for food or water. This was a spiritual endurance he was uniquely granted, and people are explicitly warned you cannot bear this. It sets a healthy boundary. It keeps the model aspirational but also practical.
The practical example, combined with just the incredible love his followers had for him, it paints this amazing picture. I'm thinking of that companion, Abdullah bin Zaid, who prayed to be made blind after the prophet's death because he couldn't bear to see the world without him.
That level of devotion, when it's coupled with a perfect model, that's what engineered the transformation of a whole society. From the brutality of Jahiliyyah to the Asr Sadat, the age of happiness, in a single generation.
So the ultimate lesson isn't just in his life, but in the radical devotion of the people he guided.
Let's end with that powerful image. The companion, Abad bin Sharahil, he's on guard duty, he's praying, and he gets shot by arrows. Multiple arrows.
And he keeps praying.
He refuses to break his prayer. He endures the wounds until he realizes he might be compromising the prophet's command to guard the post. He only stopped because of his duty, not because of the pain.
That profound level of devotion, prioritizing the divine word over his own life, that's what transformed a savage society into a civilized one. So if following this model transformed the utterly broken into the entirely righteous, what profound responsibility does this exemplary life, the Usve Hussein, place upon you as you navigate the moral complexities of our modern world? That's the question this deep dive really leaves us with.